Good afternoon. My name is Ahmed Al Karaiti, and I will be presenting today about the business challenges in Algeria. Um, the presentation highlights includes an overview about Algeria, um, general overview about Algerian culture, Algerian business environment and challenges, in addition to which are challenges in Algeria. If we start by the overview about Algeria, Algeria is literally the largest African country and the 11th largest in the world. Algeria has 48 provinces and is mostly desert Saharan land with 90% of its population concentrated along the fertile coastal line. The population of Algeria is about 41 million. Uh, they are ethnically homogeneous with about 80% Arab and 20% Berber. Arabic is the official language. Other languages include French and a couple of different Berber languages. 99% of the population are Sunni Muslims and 1% are Christians or Jews. 42% of the population are between the age of 25 and 54, and the largest city is the Algiers, which is also the capital. An overview to continue, we talk about the French rule, which was there for over a century, and they finally gained independence in 1962 after fighting for independence for more than a decade. Algeria's primary political party is the National Liberation Front, which was established in 1954 to fight for independence, and they are still dominating the political scene in Algeria up to date. Current president is Abdelaziz Bouteflika, who won the elections in 1999 and subsequent elections in 2009, 2004, and 2014. Algeria is very rich in natural resources. It's rich in petroleum, natural gas, iron ore, phosphates, uranium, lead, and zinc. The legal system there is a kind of a mix between the French civil law and the Islamic law. If we want to talk about the culture, it has to be noted that the Algerian culture is greatly influenced by history, literature, music, crafts, religion, and different arts. The unique culture can be easily seen in the various displays of carpets, ceramics, pottery, silverwork, and wood carvings. The diversity in culture is largely a result of various ethnic groups in the mainland of Algeria. Algerians' greetings and meetings are sincere, like most of the Middle Eastern cultures. This includes handshake, lengthy conversations about family, work, house, weather, in addition to exchange of hugs and kisses on the cheeks with friends and family. eh, Foreigners need to be actually, or even the locals or anyone else in Algeria need to be careful about specific things related to culture, which includes um, avoiding prolonged eye contact with women and not to ask about personal questions. Religious men could also avoid shaking hands with women. Women are usually start or first nod when initially greeted, and then wait to see if a hand is extended to them for a handshake. The use of titles is actually very important in Algerian culture, as it's a sign of respect that represents the hierarchical nature of the society. Hiring friends and relatives or recommending them to colleagues is not seen as a patronage or favoritism in Algeria, but it is rather seen as a privilege. Um, as most Middle Eastern countries, talking about politics and religion could be very sensitive, especially from foreigners. Um, so it's preferably not to preferably to stay away from such topics in especially in the workplace. Algeria is a conservative Islamic country, so abiding to their beliefs and traditions is greatly appreciated. This includes refraining from drinking alcoholic drinks in public and respecting the family privacy, especially when it comes to dealing with women. Um, we start. We can start talking right now about the business climate. So, the business climate in Algeria, we have to start by saying that Algerian economy is mostly under state control. It is basically a socialist model where the private sector has very little role and the state has upper hand on all imports and exports. The Algerian currency is called the Algerian dinar. One US dollar is about 117.7 Algerian dinar. Hydrocarbons constitutes the largest sector of the economy, accounting for more than 30% of the GDP, 60% of the budget revenues, and 95% of the export. Algeria is indeed a rich country in fossil fuels, as can be seen. It is the 10th largest reserve. It has the 10th largest reserve of natural gas in the world, and third largest reserve of shale gas. The Algerian economy suffered really a lot during the past few years as a result from the declining fossil fuel prices, which led to the loss of more than half of its foreign currency reserves. It went down from $20 billion by the end of 2013 to only $7 billion by 2017. This drop actually in the foreign reserves was a kind of a shake and an earthquake for the Algerian economy and was felt by everyone from top to bottom. For example, the government was forced to reduce its state-driven growth to distribute rents, fund generous public subsidies as the government has been under great pressure to reduce spending. And in order to compensate for the revenue loss from the dropping oil prices, the government adopted a different budgetary and restrictive measures, which included increasing the taxes, which led to modest increase in prices for gasoline, cigarettes, alcohol, and certain imported goods. In addition to that, the government has imposed additional restrictions on access to foreign exchange for imports and quotas on specific products such as cars. Those restrictions became more tough as the government in January 2018 imposed an indefinite suspension on the importation of roughly 850 products, subject to periodic review. The other sector of the Algerian economy include construction, agriculture, trade, and banking, in addition to tourism. But it has to be kept in mind before talking about each one of them. All those sectors are still under the control of the government by different means. And we can see right now that uh, most of the construction is carried out by foreign countries from the Middle East, Europe, and China. It includes building new motorways, public transport facilities such as railroads and urban uh, tramways, and different housing programs to address the housing deficits. Algerian agriculture, is also under government control and is famous for the quality of its oasis grown dates, which is one of the major export products after oil and natural. Trading and banking is another important sector in the Algerian economy. The number of banks have actually increased from 5 to more than 25 in the last 25 years after the partial liberation of the economy in the 1990s. Banks are still under the strict control of the central bank, which has to be noted here still. It's not really a true free market. Domestic trade was also improved during the 1990s as the government allowed the private sector to trade with outside world. Um, Algeria is not utilizing actually its full potentials in tourism sector as it's overseen. This sector is totally overseen by the revenues generated by the hydrocarbon industries. Algeria has a great, it has to be noted here, has a huge informal sector, which is a black market that developed in response to the high prices of imported goods and lack of abundance in domestic products. This informal sector is allowed to function freely in Algeria as it employs over 40% of the actors. The informal sector is actually huge and it deals with everything. It doesn't only deal with consumer goods, but it also deals with industrial inputs from medium and small scale enterprises. The informal sector runs freely and parallel to, is in fact integrated to the formal state dominated economy as goods flow in both directions. The Algerian government knows about this informal sector and did not try to stop it, as it removes a huge burden from the government with regards to job creation and supply of goods. The prevalence, the challenges here in the Algerian economy can be summarized as the prevalence of the socialism with heavy government restrictions on imports, exports, and availability of foreign currency, heavy business regulations and requirements, especially for foreign investors, foreign companies and investors as construction companies that we have talked about earlier. They're required to form joint ventures with local companies in order to be able to do any business in Algeria. The lack of economic diversification is another challenge, as the economy is heavily dependent on fossil fuels. This leads actually to a kind of unstable economy as the hydrocarbon prices keep fluctuating up and down. And we have seen earlier how this have affected everyone in the economy. The HR challenges are really great and they are part of the economic challenges. One of the biggest thing is the lack of availability of highly skilled workers. Uh, while this economy is the population is growing rapidly, and they are suffering from an increased rate of unemployment too. And this unemployment is not skilled. So here is one of the biggest challenges that HR can be facing. Algeria also suffer from limited number of training facilities and limited investment in training. Recruitment can be another challenge for any HR or for any even uh, multinational enterprise because of the lack of transparency and fairness in the recruitment process. There's also a lot of favoritism and patronage is which is considered okay in the Algerian culture is not really considered okay in a lot or not all of the multinational enterprises. Corruption and bribes is pretty common there too, um, and um, and those issues need to be also kept in mind with any HR department. Labor movement is another issue too. Labor movement can be actually a huge challenge in the economy for Algeria. The reason why, because it's heavily regulated under the current Algerian economic socialism, with like everything else. It's really difficult to get things in and out, and this is in addition to different culture and economic challenges with expatriates. So if you want to get anyone inside the country, they have to be adapted to the culture, which is Middle Eastern different cultures. Of course, each culture is different from each other, but those regular challenges for expatriates, in addition to the laws and regulations enforced by the government, can be really very challenging. Another challenge is the contradicting and confusing labor laws. That's the result of an unclear hybrid vision between the long-standing socialism and mixed market economy. Another factor also to be kept in mind is terrorism and instability in the Middle East, which can lead to huge concern about personnel safety. Finally, but not last, the political instability in such autocratic countries such as Algeria can be really very challenging for foreign investors and HR departments as the laws and regulations keeps on changing so often in order to protect the regime. So, in other words, instead of being under the mercy of the open market and the free market, we find that those enterprises and HRs are under the mercy of the regimes and the laws and regulations that keep on changing to protect this regime. And thank you very much for listening. And hopefully, it will be some kind of an addition to everyone's knowledge about the economic and the business situation in Algeria. Thanks.